Hello. No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. My. 2 days ago, I finished reading this novel. For 2 days, I've been haunted, and I'm hoping that with the making of this video, I will be able to exorcise the poltergeist that is haunting me from this novel. The plot. A stranger finds these 3 notebooks, diaries, wherein it is written the tragic life story of the hero, said ironically. There are also 3 photographs, and he goes on to describe these photographs and how peculiar they are, the person being photographed, like how odd they appear. That was really quite good. I enjoyed that. And then we begin with the first journal, and it is the story of this child who, from a very young age, realizes that he doesn't fit in. In fact, he sees the entire rest of the human race as aliens, while also considering himself to be an alien. He feels no affinity for his society, his family, his brothers and sisters, his siblings, his parents. He just has no connection with them. From the very beginning of the novel, like, this character just exudes this feeling of disenfranchisement. He does not belong to the same human race that we belong to. Realizing this, he makes a clown of himself. He becomes a bit of a fool, a jester. And that way, even though he doesn't fit in, he realizes he can make people laugh. And he's quite good at this. He's talented. So this is what he makes of himself. He becomes a bit of a fool. And that way he makes people laugh. And that laughter allows him to, not to fit in, but to relax. There's a very critical difference there. He can relax as long as everybody's laughing at him, because he's fulfilling a role where he's participating, even though he has this inward dread. He grows up and decides that he wants to become an artist. And later in his life, when he's like a teenager or on the cusp of becoming a university student, he meets an artist who's a bit disenfranchised, and this character really leads him astray. Is that accurate? Is it safe to say that he's led astray? He will never overcome this feeling of alienation, but to mitigate it, he relies on all of the vices that are available to him. This novel is quite short, 177 pages, and the writing is so clear and sharp and succinct. He does so much with a few sentences. Just sometimes when you can capture all you need to capture in the fewest possible words. So let me read it to you. Attending classes became all the more tedious. I'd gone through elementary and high schools and was now in college without ever having been able to understand what was meant by school spirit. I never even tried to learn the songs. Before long, a student at the art class was to initiate me into the mysteries of drink, cigarettes, prostitutes, pawn shops, and left-wing thought. A strange combination, but it actually happened that way. Those 2 brief sentences. I met this other young man, and he initiated me into this world of vice, which I gave myself to rather happily. You can't write that with any more brevity than what he does. I don't know why. I love it so very dearly when an author can express so much in such a short amount of space. Now, this character that he meets when he's at college, I found this character to be the most curious one in the story. I could understand the main character quite well. You know, he's suffering with this morbid self-conscious anxiety. That is quite clear. But it was this other character because, he's being described by this boy. And I always wondered how clearly we were seeing this character. Like, at first he's presented as, he comes up to him and he says, can you lend me 5 yen? He does, and he says, oh, great, now we can go get a drink. And they go off drinking together, and leads him quite astray in several different ways. He remains a constant figure in his life for the next several years. It always just made me wonder how, the untrustworthy, first-person narrator, like how truthfully this character is meant to be portrayed. Well, because he seems to be quite a con man. You know, one of those guys who he's around when you've got money and he's around when you're buying drinks, but as soon as you're out of money, he's gone. So the main character of the story goes down this road of alcohol, intense, morbid depression at the fact that he cannot participate in this, thing called life. He must be either quite attractive or he just must have something that women like, because women fall for him, they sleep with him, and they take care of him without his trying. Of course, without trying. He doesn't really try at anything at all. Even with his art, he never really manages to do anything with it. He has these romances with women. Okay, romance is really the wrong word. He has these acquaintances with women. He sleeps with them for a while and gets bored or moves on, or he just becomes too self-disgusted by himself. He just has to leave whatever little life he has and move to something else because he's just too disgusted every time he looks in the mirror. With a bar girl, as she's always described, in Tokyo, they formed this little suicide pact. They tie themselves together with their obi and throw themselves into the river. She drowns and dies, and he does not. He is arrested and not charged with any serious crimes, but he's put into a sanitarium for a little while. He is disowned by his family and has to do something with his life. He doesn't show any regret about what happened to this girl. He just moves forward. If he regrets anything, he regrets the situation that it puts him in. He regrets the results of it, that now he is arrested and now he has to stay in a sanitarium and now he has to rely on his uncle for money. And I think you can imagine where it goes from there. There's not a happy ending. This book really took me back to when I was a young man in my early 20s. There was a phase of my life where I got into existentialism. It affected me for quite a few years. The whole constant self-analysis, dread and futility of ever making any effort to do something with your life, because what's the point? We're all food for the worms, ultimately. The constant anxiety of living in a world that is nothing but chaos and indecision. Now, I only have a very superficial understanding of existentialism, so don't take my word for anything at all. To my mind, there were always two layers to existentialism. There was that first layer, which was all the depression and the black clothes and the smoking strong cigarettes and just, the world is black and the future is nothing and we only live for this 1 hour of our lives because we cannot imagine what will come. That first layer, as far as Albert Camus was concerned, should give way to a sense of amazing freedom. If you are unconstrained by what society expects of you, and you are unconstrained or unshackled from the harness of religion, and you can remove all the things that weigh you down, obligation you feel to your parents and the obligation that society places on you, if you can just tear all of those hindrances off of your mind and live freely. That was what Camus believed in as far as existentialism, that yes, the dread is natural because, we're all very finite creatures. We're going to die. The world will continue on its merry way. And we have this short span of existence to try to figure out what to do with it. It isn't that you need to make $1 million, and it isn't that you need to have, raise a family. The question is, what do you do with your life? If you got the $1 million, what's next? If you raise a family, what's next? What if you get those things and you discover that they were silly goals to have? That is the existential dread. What do I do with this short amount of life that is given to me? Do I have to do anything? Can I just sit in the corner and just wait it out? But it should give way to some freedom. Instead of worrying about death and the end of your corporal existence, it should transform into a gift that you live every day with a sense of uniqueness and appreciation. Yes, I am going to die, but I've been given another day. Regardless of your position in life, regardless of your wealth, even your physical state, you are still alive. Not only is that a great and miraculous thing, it's also the only thing we truly have. We have this day to be alive and to make something of it. So that perhaps when you lie down in bed and you close your eyes and you think, I've had another day of breathing, heart beating, you had exactly the same thing that the wealthiest people have, the most famous people have, the poorest people, the sickest people. We all had a day today. It is a miracle exponentially multiplied by all of the creatures on this very tiny planet. However, most people really get bogged down with the first stage of existentialism. It's black, everything is coming to an end. There's no point in trying because it's all futile and you'll probably make a mess of it anyway. Well, there is that, but hopefully people make a step beyond that. They should. That is sort of it's funny because that final, ultimately freeing last step in the existentialism philosophy seems to be the one that's, just missing most of the time. Everybody likes to get bogged down in the dread. So having said all that, I get quite sick and tired of existentialism and the whole, the futility of life and the whole horrors of being a human being. How can anyone bear it? Isn't it miserable? Isn't it ridiculous that we just put on this charade that we call society and life? I find that very uninteresting at this stage of my life. I think that existentialism and all of that self-loathing and self-pitying and self-analysis and self-criticism, I find that all to be, obviously too selfish, too self-important. You're spending too much time looking in the mirror. It's narcissistic. Like maybe you don't feel that you are a part of society, but you're surely not helping yourself by dwelling on it. Like I can just feel this character sort of just trying to suck all of the juice out of his own self-loathing. He can't get enough of it. He really can't. And he takes it to the point where he allows his own alienation, self-imposed and very much imaginary. Like this is all in his own mind. He meets women, people give him jobs, he's talented as a cartoonist, and he just can't get over his own imaginary sense of self-loathing and destroys himself. I had enough of it in my early 20s when I was big into the existentialism. I think that eventually you need to move on from that because there are bigger things than your own sense of, where you are in this universe. There's a society to consider. There's your country to consider. Don't spend so much time criticizing your life and yourself and looking in the mirror and finding all of the faults. You can have a lot more fun and have a much better effect on society if you take that and you point it towards some of the problems in society. Like if you took all of that inward looking disappointment and you turned it on to something else, who knows? You might even make a difference. You might even do something with your life. I do think it is a good book. I can understand why it is also a very popular book. The existentialist way of thinking, it's very common. A lot of people spend a lot of time looking inwards. And a lot of people don't like what they see, because they see all of the, those secret things that they keep hidden, even from other people. You do need to grow up and move on from your own shortcomings as you perceive them. You need to get past that. You cannot spend your existence and your short existence only focusing on those problems. You need to move forward. That is what life is. It's not in the constant self-reflective criticism. It isn't. It doesn't do anything for you. You might write a book, but Osamu Dazai, he came to a very bad end. He killed himself. Like, this book is semi-autobiographical. Like, when you read this, you are reading about this man, how he felt, the tragic mistakes that he made. So while it is a good book, it's a book to read when you're younger, 19, 20. When you get to 25, 25 is the age to put away all the existential grief and anxiety and move on to bigger and better things to be anxious about. Be worried more about the economy, be worried about the environment, be worried about your country, and be worried about corruption, be worried about the state of the world, the wars that are going on. These are things to really worry about. You looking at yourself in the mirror saying, people don't like me, it's not worthy. It's not worthy of your contemplation. It's a little bit surprising that it's as popular as it seems to be. Does a good job what it's trying to do. It's just that I don't really like what it's trying to do very much. I hate the idea of suicide. I think I'm going to get into trouble, but suicide to me, it just feels like the worst lack of imagination. You can kill yourself or you could go hitchhiking. Which one would you rather do? I mean, you might get killed hitchhiking, but think how much more exciting that will be. Think how curious you will be to if you're going to get killed. So you can kill yourself, or I don't know, you could work in a factory. Think how loud it will be. Think how awful. Think how much you will want to go back to school to do something else. Like, suicide for me, it's just the worst waste. You can't even imagine one thing to live for. Really, don't kill yourself. Do some shoplifting. You're going to have some fun doing that. You might come home with something really good, or you might get in a fight with a security guard, and that's better than killing yourself. For Christ's sake, don't kill yourself. It's just so, the world was here for hundreds of millions of years before we got here. It will be the same once we're gone, that it will just keep rolling around the sun without us. And we're alive for this little, just snapshot of a life. And that's all we get. Just try to cherish that little fragment of existence that you are going to lay claim to. Just love it, because that's the only thing you really have. Good for young people. Older people, it's a bit of I remember in my early 20s when I wore the black clothes all the time. Was it a good time? It was kind of funny, but I probably bored the shit out of everybody I talked to. Yeah, don't talk to Grant. He's always in such a bad mood. Now I'm in a bad mood, but it's more about, the world in general, not just, looking at myself and being unhappy. Book lottery. $5 support on Patreon a month gets your name in here. You know how it works, right? I pull out a name, and the name this week is, oh goodness, I was waiting to pull this one out. Michael E. Thank you for your support, Michael. Michael and I were friends a long time ago when I lived in Ottawa, and we were both quite reprobates, drinking a lot and sometimes more than just drinking. And when I went to Europe, I started exercising and I started getting into the martial arts, changing my life, not drinking so much, not being such a scumbag as I was. We both worked in restaurants, and the restaurant world, lots of drinking, lots of hard nights, lots of carousing, the seedy side. Anyway, Michael was a cook, and when I came back from Europe, and I was different, physically different, I was more muscular, and I wasn't such a skinny, cigarette-smoking, hard-drinking guy. I had changed, and Michael didn't like that. Michael thought I'd become a prick. And I looked at Michael differently, too. I thought that he was a loser for not changing. I go to Europe, and 8 years later, I come back, and you're just still running around drinking and taking drugs and just going crazy in Ottawa all the time. 8 years later, you're still doing that in Ottawa. It's such a tiny little fishbowl to be swimming around in. And so we really had a sharp conflict of personality that he wanted me to be that same way, wild, crazy, drink, drugs, cigarettes, and just running around acting like a maniac. I looked at him like, I've moved on from that. My life isn't like that anymore. I'm doing better things now, exercising and living more stably than I used to. And he looked at me like, oh man, you've given up. You've become one of the squares. Well, it ruined the friendship for a very long time. And I've been quite tentative talking to him because I don't think he's ever really forgiven me for changing so drastically from we were the same. I went away, I came back, I was very different. He was the same. But now, I don't like him because he's the same, and he doesn't like me because I've changed. So, but he supports me on Patreon, and I'm going to send him this book. I'm going to send him my book. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Take care.